Hello, listener. Are you happy with your life? It's all right if you thought no. Most people would answer the same, even if they don't outwardly admit it. Most of us go throughout our daily lives attempting to be someone else. It's the human condition to never be satisfied with who we truly are. So we often wear masks to pretend like we're better people, a better spouse or parent, a better employee, a better friend, always striving to be better than who we are. But what about those who may not have been conditioned the same way as us? How would we be viewed from the outside looking in? Are our masks truly necessary? Should we be satisfied? Maybe we should tear away our masks to find out. Gordon Simmons slammed into his locker.
Ow! What the hell?
Man, Gordo, your locker stinks worse than you do.
Even with his eyes a half-inch away from the locker, Gordon could tell by the voice that it was Jordan Merrick. This was just one of the few assholes to target him this year. This particular one had a point, however. The smell emanating from his locker almost made him gag. Jordan gave one more shove before backing off. Crinkling his nose, he looked Gordon up and down and walked away, flicking him off in the process. Frustrated, Gordon smoothed out his old Oxford button-down and tried, unsuccessfully, to flatten out his ratty brown curls. Taking a deep breath for composure, he choked on the stench. After he finished sputtering, he covered his nose with the collar of his shirt while working the locker combination with his free hand. With a click, the lock came free. Apprehensively, he opened the narrow door. His math and history textbooks were on the top shelf where he left them. He looked in the larger bottom section, thinking that something from an old lunch had fallen out of his bag and gotten lost. Digging through gaming magazines and old homework marked with average grades, nothing was to be found. The source of the smell had to be coming from the top shelf. Gordon pulled his history book down and immediately jumped back in alarm, screaming. In his shock, he unfortunately knocked into Erica Burrows.
Watch what you're doing, you ass!
The normally bustling students in the hallway became silent, staring wide-eyed at Gordon in all of his awkwardness.
Sorry.
Erica scoffed, rolled her eyes, and stormed off. He stood in the middle of the hall, which was once again busy with teens. Embarrassed, he moved toward his locker again.
I can't believe I almost knocked over Erica Burrows.
Gordon had a thing for Erica since middle school. It seemed like every year his popularity would regress, along with his chances at ever being with his dream girl. His dream girl with beautiful flowing blonde hair, a stunning smile, great figure, and great big perfect...
Gordon!
He snapped out of his daydream. It was Ryan Turley, his best friend since 2nd grade and World of Warcraft companion since 7th.
Yo, Gordon, get back to reality!
Gordon shook his head.
Sorry. It's been an interesting day.
Ryan stepped between him and his locker.
The hell was that? And
And what the hell is that smell?
Gordon looked over his friend's head at the face staring out from the top shelf of the locker through empty holes where the eyes should be. Cringing, he motioned for Ryan to look.
Whoa, that's pretty creepy. Is that what smells?
Yeah, I think someone slipped that mask into my locker somehow and put something on it to make it stink.
They did a pretty good job with the blood, too. How'd they get it in there?
Shrugging, Gordon reached over Ryan and pinched the tip of the mask between his thumb and forefinger.
Hey, watch the hair!
Why? You got a date or something?
Ryan twisted his freckled face into a sneer, making his buck teeth protrude more than usual. Patting his pal on the back, Gordon walked to the nearest waste bin and tossed the face inside. Later that night, Gordon sat in his living room on the blue Lazy Boy recliner facing the TV. It was 10 in the evening, so not much was on except the local news. He sighed and watched as the anchorwoman presented a piece about the 10-year anniversary of the burning of the Sisters of Grace Orphanage.
Has housed children from infants to teenagers with the mission of providing stability and discipline to children in order to prevent them from becoming troubled youths living on the streets. Unfortunately, the fire took the lives of all those in the building that night. The mayor has announced that there will be a vigil held at the town hall in remembrance of the victims.
The town was in shock for months afterward. The most messed up part of the event, in Gordon's opinion, was that a large amount of the bodies were never recovered. Many people thought that some of the kids escaped into the local woods, yet no one bothered to look for them. The police assumed they were dead, but knowing this town, it was more than likely that no one wanted to take in the kids if they happened to be found, and it was easier for everyone to act like they were dead. They had no family, and what were the chances they survived anyway? A minute later, the reporter had caught his full attention.
In other news, a local boy from East Mayfield High has been reported missing. Cameron Jenkins is a junior at the school. He is approximately 5 feet 7 inches, has short brown hair, and usually wears glasses. If you have any knowledge of Cameron's whereabouts, please contact the local police.
Gordon recognized the boy as someone he took algebra with. They never really talked to each other, but it was a little disturbing to hear the news. He shook his head, putting the missing classmate out of his mind. Disappointed with the late-night entertainment selection, he turned off the television and went to bed.
Coming up, is your conscience trying to kill you? Find out if that little voice inside your head is a sweet angel or a fiendish demon. We'll be right back.
The next day, there was hallway chatter of not only the missing student, but also a teacher who strangely stopped showing up for school without notice. Rumors flooded the classrooms about how the teacher might have abducted Cameron Jenkins. His head churning with his own concoction of possible scenarios, Gordon stood, spaced out at his locker before lunch.
What up?
What's got you so chipper?
Nothing much. I had a good night last night.
Ah, so the date went well then.
It did, actually. I think I'm gonna go on another one.
Attaboy.
Gordon placed his books in his locker before heading toward the cafeteria, walking beside his friend while arguing that the school's chicken salad was much worse than the lasagna.
Okay, look, the lasagna is the most disgusting thing that the school serves. You know this.
Oh God, no. The chicken salad literally makes me want to puke. Ugh.
Over the course of the week, the strange disappearances continued. Brad Tillman, a freshman member of the student government. Monica Gale, one of the lunch ladies. Robert Ortiz, backup quarterback for the varsity football team. Just some of the missing. By Friday, the entire school was in a state of quiet panic. Some parents decided to keep their children home, and talks began of shutting down the school. The campus was crawling with police, looking for clues or anything suspicious. During second period, Gordon and Ryan sat next to each other, both looking equally jaded from their teacher's droning and constant chalk tapping on the blackboard. Out of the corner of his eye, Gordon noticed Ryan's head perk up, peering outside. Intrigued, Gordon craned his neck to look through the windows too. Ryan jumped up and leaned closer to the window.
Mr. Turley, what do you think you're doing?
It's Brad Tillman.
Everyone rushed to the windows, pressing up against the glass to get a better view. Even Mr. Monotone, The history teacher jockeyed for position to see the unfolding event.
Oh my god!
Sure enough, it was Brad, looking disheveled, but seemingly unharmed, walking out of the nearby woods to the west. One of the cops patrolling outside finally noticed the once missing student and sprinted to him. He put an arm around Brad and helped him toward the school building hastily. After they walked out of view of the classroom window, the lesson resumed, but no one was concentrating on it at all. Lunchtime arrived as it did every day. The path to the cafeteria always led by the school nurse. As Gordon and Ryan passed, they noticed the door partly open. The same cop stood inside with his back facing the entrance. He stepped to the side to speak with the nurse over some paperwork, along with the school principal, Millard Wilson. The two friends stopped in the middle of the hall and gazed inside at Cameron, who was sitting atop the paper-covered examination bench, looking at the floor. Suddenly, Brad jerked his head up and stared back at them. His eyes didn't look like those of a victim's. They were piercing. It was enough to send chills up their spines. Gordon averted his eyes elsewhere.
Brad probably wants to be alone anyway.
He and Ryan continued to lunch. The day continued as more and more of the missing reappeared from the neighboring woods. The authorities began sending search teams into the tree line, coming out every so often with another missing person. While students and staff rejoiced over the returns, there were a lot of questions. Why were the students coming back now, and all at the same time? Where were they to begin with? What happened to them while they were gone? Unfortunately, none of these questions were answered. The returning students and staff told the police they couldn't remember anything. The story was the same all around. They black out on the day they went missing and came to in the woods, finding their way back to civilization. Mystery hung thick in the air when classes ended for the weekend. After giving statements and receiving checkups, the missing were allowed to go home to their families. The weekend sped by. Gordon, bored at home, tried to get in contact with Ryan, but to no avail. When Sunday came along, he was getting worried, especially when he heard that people were still going missing, even after the returns of the other East Mayfield students and staff. After a night of tossing and turning with anxiety, Gordon slunk out of bed and headed for another Monday at school. At his locker, he stood on edge, waiting for his friend. 5 minutes before first period started, he was about to give up the wait and head to literature. He noticed a flash of red hair in the crowd of last-minute students hurrying to class. Ryan broke free of the small mob and stood in front of Gordon, panting, pushing his glasses back to the ridge of his nose.
What up?
Not wanting to be late, they both speed-walked towards their next classes.
Where were you? I've been trying to reach you all weekend.
Sorry, had another date. We were out late.
This chick better be good. We'll talk later.
They split up to head to their different classrooms. While sitting in his first period class, Gordon didn't miss a beat with his daily routine. After preparing for class, he sat cat-a-corner to Erica Burrows and admired her from afar. He did this every day, but today was a bit different. As he gawked at the back of her head, she suddenly whipped her face around to look at him. Unprepared, he tried to play off the fact that he was ogling her, but noticed something off. Her eyes. They bore into him like Brad's did on Friday. Disquieted, he faced forward and waited for class to start, trying to ignore the feeling of her stare. Oddly enough, he was a little happy when Jordan Merrick walked in. Every other day, he shared this class with Jordan, who would sit directly behind him and pester him in some way or another. Gordon weirdly looked forward to it, to take his mind off of Erica and bring a sense of normality to his day. His relief was short-lived. Jordan cruised past him and took his place at his desk. Slowly, Gordon turned his head and peeked at the bully. He received the same stare. Feeling like he was between two crushing forces, Gordon slid down in his seat, trying to avoid the two students' attention. The class felt as if it would never end, but finally, it was over. To his dismay, the next period was the same. A large portion of students acting strange. Gordon wanted to go home. He somehow made it to lunch without freaking out and scanned the cafeteria for Ryan. Finally, a friendly sight as his friend's geeky demeanor emerged from the crowd of students.
Ready for some grub?
Yeah, I've never wanted lunch more in my life.
Dude, you gotta start eating breakfast.
After getting their food, they sat down at their usual table. Gordon stared at his food, shifting bits of corn around on his tray.
Hey, you okay?
What? Yeah, sorry.
Alright. Well, here's some good news for you. Erica was returned over the weekend. Then again, bad news is, so was Jordan Merrick.
I didn't even know they were missing in the first place.
Oh. Well, now you know.
Gordon cocked his head a bit.
Actually, something has been bothering me.
What's up?
The people who were returned have been acting really strange, including Erica and Jordan.
Ryan swallowed the food in his mouth and put down his fork.
Oh? Strange as in how?
Just creepy. Like they aren't even themselves. Jordan didn't act like a douchebag, and Erica seems to be less like Erica.
Ryan nodded slowly.
That is kind of weird.
And you know what else is weird?
Hmm?
Throughout this whole thing, you haven't seemed too bothered.
A shadow eclipsed the table in front of Gordon. Confused, he turned around. Erica stood behind him, close enough that he could smell her perfume.
What? What's going on?
Ryan gave a faint smile in return.
You're the last piece of the collection, Gordon.
What are you talking about?
Jordan Merrick approached the table to his left. He became claustrophobic all of a sudden. He realized that more and more of his fellow students were surrounding the table.
Is this a joke? It's not funny!
My friend. Well, actually, you're Ryan's friend.
He gazed at Gordon's frightened and confused face, coveting it.
My friends and I have been wanting to do this for a very long time. All this time spent watching from the woods, observing the drama, all of these juicy personalities. You gotta love high school. What's even funnier is how much you all want to be someone else. All of you hiding behind your masks. You don't even know how good you have it. So, we figured if you're not happy with your lives, your school, your friends, your loving families, we'll appreciate it more than any of you will.
The disdain for Gordon was palpable. Dumbstruck, all he could do was stare in disbelief with his mouth hanging open.
You still don't get it. Fine. Take your friend Ryan, for instance. When he went on his date, which was with me, by the way, he just gushed about you when I asked him if he was happy with his life.
Gordon watched in horror as the imposter grabbed what should be Ryan's lips and stretched them out from the rest of his face, farther than should have been humanly possible. The stranger beneath it began to flap the lips as if it were a puppet, mocking Gordon's friend.
Oh, Gordon's such a pussy. He won't stand up for himself. He always complains about this town and the people here. He makes me look bad, but I don't want to be an asshole and leave him all alone. Please don't scoop out my eyeballs, Mr. No-Face.
He let go of the lips, and they slowly sank back into place, like a rubber band that was stretched just a tad too much. He wheezed a laugh through the mouth hole. With that, he moved both of his hands to the back of his head. The students and staff followed in suit. One by one, they pulled forward. With a sickening sound like pulling week-old lunch meat off of linoleum, their faces came off. Gordon was surrounded by hideously disfigured faces, many of which seemed to have mostly been burned off a long time ago. Most of these people were tearing off what looked like flesh-colored clay and other things used as prosthetics to blend their eyes and mouths into their new faces. Gordon looked around before locking onto the one who had been speaking as Ryan. The skin on this one had been fused together so bad that there were only tiny slits where his eyes and mouth should have been. The man wiped the rest of the makeup from around his mouth.
Ryan whined all the way to the end, just like the rest of you. Don't worry, though. We'll give your lives more meaning than they ever had before. Tell the sisters we said hello.
The fleshy head grinned at him while the others held him on the chair. Gordon screamed. He screamed until he tasted blood in his throat. The glint of a knife was the last thing he saw before it dug into his eye sockets, removing each one, creating two hollow spaces in his skull. With his strength finally starting to leave him, the last thing Gordon felt was the suction of his face being peeled off. Now, a mask for another. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to our very first episode. And because this is the first episode, I'd like to give some information out about what we're trying to do with Shadow Stories, how to get in touch, and more. After that, what we'll be attempting to do after every episode is to provide all you listeners with a bit of a palate cleanser with some bloopers. So stay tuned. First thing, the plan for Shadow Stories is to provide 2 episodes a month with fully produced episodes of short horror stories. Currently, the stories are written by me, but we are definitely open to receiving stories from other authors. If you have a story you would like to submit, email us at ShadowStoriesPod@gmail.com. You can also email us at the same address with any other comments or questions or whatever you may have. Second, if you are someone who would like to sponsor Shadow Stories, again, email us at ShadowStoriesPod@gmail.com and we can discuss details. As a note for potential sponsors and other listeners alike, we will never place ads in the beginning or middle of the episode. That would really ruin the immersion, and we don't want to do that to you. That said, we would really appreciate it if you could listen to the entire outro sequence, like you are now, and support any sponsors we may have, as that would support the podcast. Plus, you'll have a fun little blooper reel at the end. Finally, everyone involved with making each episode works really hard on giving you the best, spookiest quality we can muster, so please consider checking out any links in the show description with regards to our performers, artists, musicians, etc., and consider supporting the show in general by subscribing to whatever platform you may be listening on, sharing the episode online, and then telling your friends to become listeners as well. Thank you so much for being a part of our first episode, and we hope to be able to scare you for many, many more. Now please, enjoy the bloopers.
With the mission of providing stability and discipline to children in order to
Confounded and hogswabble, my notes have disappeared.
Oh, Gordon, wow. There's so much for just using a paperclip or something for this one.
Today marks the 10th anniversary of the trip.
Nah, that don't feel right. That feel a little too high-pitched.
I do enjoy this so much, though. Graze the skin with my fingertips. The brush of dead cold flesh pacifies the means. Provocative images, delicate features so smooth.
Plah. Or fiendish. It is Finnish. It is Finnish demon. As I do not do Finnish accent, I become Russian.
A pleasant fragrance in the light of the moon. Dance with the dead in my dreams. Listen to the hallowed screams. The dead have taken my soul. Temptations lost all control.